Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to take an in-depth look at one of the most essential design patterns in software development, the Singleton pattern. We'll explore what it is, where to use it, how to implement it in different ways, and even discuss some of the challenges it presents. By the end of this video, you'll have a solid understanding of the Singleton pattern and how to use it effectively in your JavaScript projects. Let's start with the basics. The singleton pattern is a design pattern that restricts the instantiation of a class to just one instance and provides a global point of access to that instance. This means that no matter how many times you try to create an instance of that class, you'll always get the same one. So why would you want to do this? Well, the singleton pattern is particularly useful when you need to manage shared resources like a configuration settings or a database connection or a logging mechanisms. Imagine you had multiple instances of a database connection floating around. It could lead to some serious issues in your applications, right? Now let's jump into the code and see a basic implementation of the singleton pattern in JavaScript. We'll start with a simple example, a logger class. This will be responsible for logging messages and will ensure that only one instance of that class is ever created. So we start by creating a logger class, which will have two functions, that is a log function and a print log count. So the log function will be adding messages to a logs array and then printing it. And print log count will simply just print the length of the logs array. Finally, we create two instances of it, logger1 and logger2. We add one log to each of the instance, but when we print it, we see that each time the log count outputs 2. So as you can see, even though we have created two instances, logger1 and logger2, they both refer to the same instance of the logger class. This is because the constructor checks if an instance already exists, and if it does, it returns that existing instance instead of creating a new one. This is essential for the singleton pattern. Now that we have seen how to implement a singleton, let's talk about when it's appropriate to use this pattern. The singleton pattern is great when you need to coordinate access to a shared resource. Here are some common use cases: a global configuration object, a logging service, a database connection pool, or a caching system. For example, a global configuration object might store settings that are used throughout your application. If multiple instances of this object were created, it could lead to an inconsistent settings being applied. Similarly, a logging service needs to maintain a single log history, so multiple instances would just complicate things. The singleton pattern helps ensure that these resources are accessed in a controlled and consistent way. Now let's discuss an important concept related to singletons, lazy initialization. This refers to delay in creation of the singleton instance until it is actually needed. This can be useful in situations where the creation of the instance is costly in terms of performance or resources. In this example, the singleton instance isn't created until it's actually requested through the getInstance function. This is a basic form of lazy initialization, which can be especially useful when dealing with resource-intensive objects. However, one thing to keep in mind is that if you're working in a multi-threaded environment, you need to ensure that your singleton is thread safe to avoid issues like a race condition. Now let's explore how the singleton pattern can be even more streamlined using ES6 modules. JavaScript modules naturally lend themselves to singleton-like behavior because a module is evaluated once and its exports are cached. So you can effectively create a singleton by simply exporting an instance of a class. By exporting a single instance of logger class, you can ensure wherever this module is imported, the same instance is used throughout the application. This is very clean and an idiomatic way to implement the singleton pattern in modern JavaScript. There are also some interesting variants of the singleton pattern that you might come across or find useful in certain scenarios. Let's explore a few of them. In a monostate singleton, instead of ensuring a single instance of the class, you make sure that all the instances share the same state. Here is an example. Next, there is a technique used to reduce the overhead of acquiring a lock by first checking the locking criterion without actually acquiring the lock. Here's how it looks in JavaScript context. These variants can be useful in different scenarios depending on the requirement of your application. Understanding them helps you choose the right approach based on the specific needs of your project. While the singleton pattern is incredibly useful, it is important to be aware of its potential pitfalls and when it can be an anti-pattern. One major drawback is that singletons can introduce global state in your application, making it difficult to track and manage state changes. This can lead to hard to debug issues, especially in large applications. Singletons can also create tight coupling between components, making your code less flexible. Since the singleton is globally accessible, it can be easy to rely on it too heavily, which can make refactoring or extending your code more challenging. Finally, singletons can make unit testing more difficult, particularly when you need to mock or replace the singleton instance. Since there is only one instance, it can be tricky to isolate it in your tests. Because of these potential issues, it is important to use a singleton pattern judiciously. Always consider whether a singleton is the right tool for the job and be mindful of the trade-offs involved. And there you have it, a deep dive in the singleton pattern in JavaScript. We've covered what it is, how to implement it in various ways, and when to use it, and even some of the challenges it presents. The singleton pattern is a powerful tool in your design to pattern toolkit, but like any tool, it should be used with care. So that was it about singletons. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.